Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson, and today we have a man of many bands. Parker from Skin the Lamb, Suffocation, Serpent's Whisper, Cataclysm, Dying Fetus, and Seas of Malice. Parker, how are you able to manage being in all those bands?
Well, it's a combination of, luckily I have a couple jobs in some of the bands. Some of them I don't play in, and some of them I do play in. So, drum teching for Suffocation, Cataclysm, Dying Fetus, that's not as full time, just because it's when we're not on tour or when they're not on tour, they don't really need me. I'm just kind of off doing my own thing, and then when they go back on the road, if they need somebody to come out and give them a hand and crew for them, I'm there. Doing the actual playing and writing for some of the other bands takes quite a bit more time. Months and months and months of time. So it's definitely tricky. But it's one of those things where you just kind of figure out what needs the most time and you kind of go from there. So.
Yeah. So why don't you give the audience here just like a little bit of backstory on like what got you into music, kind of like what your influences are and what you're up to currently.
Yeah, man. I think it started. I'm gonna plug some of my buddies here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I first heard Chimera.
Yep.
And I heard the intro to Pure Hatred, and it's like one of those things where I didn't play drums at the time, and I just heard it and I went, I want to do that. And Andel's playing really inspired me to play drums. Funny, long story short, but funny thing, when Andel's left the band and Kevin Talley joined, I was like, oh my God, Andel's is gone. I hope this new guy is good. Kevin Talley actually became my drum teacher like 4 years later. Wow. Or something like that. And he is the dude that got me into touring. I teched for Suffocation in 2014 because Kevin was like, man, I need a drum tech on this tour. And he was like, hey, can you do it? I was like, I want to go on tour. So yeah, let's do it, Also, funny thing about Chimera, I actually got to just play some songs with Rob Arnold. And that was insane. He's like, all right, let's play Pure Hatred. Hit that intro. And I'm just like, oh no, it sounds crazy, looking up and seeing Rob playing the riffs and playing the solos, and I'm just like, oh God, don't mess up.
That's a baptism by fire if I've ever heard of one.
Man, well, that and my first real show, I'd played local shows and stuff, but it was kind of one of those things where the people that were at the show were either your parents, the band's girlfriends, or whatever. People weren't coming to see your band, and so it was kind of the pressure wasn't there, whatever. My first real show was 500 people with Jungle Rot supporting Dying Fetus.
Wow. Do you remember what that was like? What the anxiety was or whatever? What did you how'd the show end up going?
Dude, the show was sick. The 5 or 10 minutes leading up to the show were not so sick. Actually, I had a couple because it was my first real show, so I'm just like, oh my God, I gotta get everything ready, and I'm messing with my electronics, and I hit my click tracks, and I'm going, I don't hear anything. There's nothing coming out of my ears. I have no click. I hadn't even turned on my body pack to get any sound, and I was like, oh, okay, all right. Turn that on, and click came in, and I was like, oh, okay. Once we started playing, the intro was the worst part. That 60 seconds was anxiety out the roof. It was just oh my God, I'm going to tank, But it's you start playing and it's just super awesome. People are chanting the band's name. They're yelling out songs they want to hear. And man, it's awesome. I mean, that was probably one of the best shows that I've ever played. I mean, which is kind of crazy because it was my first legit show, but it was awesome.
So out of all the guests that we've had, I think you're the second or third drummer. I'm going to have to go back and check later on, but and a lot of people don't really get to talk to the drummers. I mean, they're not the lead singers, they're not the guitar players that usually get a lot of attention. But what would you say is the most underappreciated part or underappreciated or a part that people don't really give drummers too much credit for in the band?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the band. band and how you're doing things. Say a band like Goat Horror, okay? They don't. They're such a plug and play like rock and roll. Like it doesn't matter if the venue is bad or if the sound is bad. They just go. So like Zach has to just know the parts, keep good time, and play. I mean I think that's crazy. I can't play that way. So in my ears, I always have a click, recorded guitars. So it doesn't matter if the sound guy's an idiot, because there have been shows where I'll be like, dude, I need this guy's guitar, and they pump up snare in my wedge, and I hit it, and it just about like blasts my head off, and I'm like, dude, come on, you know. So I think being able to adapt to situations like a band like Goat Horror does is super important, and not a lot of drummers can do that. You know, they can't play under like poor circumstances. Obviously, Goat Horror plays huge festivals, and the sound is awesome. But, you know, sometimes the show is smaller and the sound guy isn't as good, or they don't have sufficient monitors and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. Like, they always put on a good show. So I think being able to do those smaller shows and the bigger shows is pretty huge. And just keeping good time. Yeah, I think that's pretty underappreciated, is dudes that keep good time, you know?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've come to understand too, or whatever, is the drummers really keep the beat of the band, and they really just they kind of carry the band on their back when it comes to providing them with like the beat that the guitar players can riff off of and the bass can rip off. When you're performing live, does that give like any extra added pressure on you, knowing that you're kind of the backbone to the band, and that if you as long as you keep the beat, everything's good, but if you mess up, it might kind of derail everything?
Yeah, yes and no. Bands where I haven't been playing with click tracks, that it's definitely more, it's higher pressure, higher stakes. But when you're playing with a click and studio guitars, you're playing live to the same stuff that you're practicing to. So you're like, I know the tempo, I know my cues or whatever. So it's a little bit easier then. Which, I mean, it just eliminates variables if you play to click tracks and stuff like that. So I think that's why a lot of bands are doing it these days. But yeah, it's a slick way to play shows for sure.
Now, you've also told me, we had a little talk before we started recording this podcast, you also told me that you play guitar in a few of these bands. What would you say is a skill that you can transfer from drums to guitar easily, or the most transferable skill?
Timekeeping, 120%. I mean, I've played with a lot of guitar players who are super awesome, but then you put on a click track and it's like they don't know how to play guitar. I mean, they're sitting there and they just cannot follow a click.
For those in the audience that don't know what a click track is, could you explain to them what a click track is?
Yeah, so it's just another term for metronome, just that thing that keeps time for you. And it's, some guys use it live, some guys don't. I do when I can, but I think that is the most, because I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not the most technical guitar player. I don't play like a guy like Emil Wursler or something like that. I mean, I'll never be 1/1,000,000th as good as that guy is. He can kind of do it all though, so maybe that's a bad example. But you know, I don't do leads or anything like that, but a lot of people comment on the fact that they're like, man, these songs are super solid. Well, yeah, I mean, I have a click in my ear all the time. Whether I'm playing drums or recording guitar in the studio, like, there's always a click. And I think that's probably the thing that's helped me the most going from drums to guitar, you know, because I started playing drums, picked up guitar a little bit later, so.
Yeah. So we usually talk about this a little bit later in the podcast, but we're already kind of on the subject. So performing live, what is that kind of, we always talk about the high on here. We always talk, like, musicians get from the fans and just the reaction, and knowing that like all the millions of times that you guys have practiced songs has finally been paying off, and you're able to like release what you've been kind of keeping a secret to the world. What does that feeling mean specifically to you when you're performing live?
Man, I just think there's something so different about live music. You can hear a song a million times, but then like when you see it live, And there's also just live bands that you see and you're like, whoa, that band is so sick live. I'll probably use them as an example a million times. Goat Horror. You
Mhm.
can never see Goat Horror enough times. It's just like, for whatever reason, they're just super sick live. I can't even explain why. And playing is the same way. It's just like, when you have a good show, it feels like you've been playing for 5 seconds and it's over, you know? And you're just like, oh man, I want to keep playing, you know? Just, hearing the, 20 people or 2,000 people chant your band's name or want to see you play another song. It's like, you almost can't even describe it. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe, but it's something that you have to experience to really
Mhm.
understand what it's like, you
Yeah.
know.
What is the largest crowd that you've ever played in front of?
I don't know the number, but it's whatever capacity at Baltimore Soundstage is.
Oh, wow.
We did Maryland Death Fest there in 2016, and I believe it was sold out. If it wasn't sold out, it was super super close. Anybody that knows that venue, there's like a it's not a backstage, it's a back room, like an area where they usually will set up merch and stuff. They'll block that off for most shows. But they had that whole area open, so it was packed. So I think it was probably almost, man, I just don't know what capacity is there. Over 1,000, I would guess.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah.
So, do you and the bands that you're in, do you guys like have any pre-show rituals that you guys do? Is there's like, do you guys like have any traditions that you have to do before a live show, or do you guys just kind of wing it?
Um, yeah, I mean somewhere in the middle, I'd say. We're all on ears, so we all practice to our set. Like literally, what we hear live is what we practice to. Um, so basically just, hey, are the clicks working? Oh yeah, okay, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
So nothing too crazy beyond just making sure our gear is functioning.
And for you, like, what part of it do you like? Are you like finally able to like settle in? Like, are you always like calm, cool, and collective? Like, once you get there, what's the point? Like when you first get on stage, what's the point where you finally just are able to just relax and say like, okay, I'm here, we're doing this.
Yeah, at this point, there's not a lot of not as much show anxiety.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes when you're playing bigger ones or you're playing in front of somebody, you're kind of like, then you're like, oh man, I have extra incentive not to mess up because this person is here or we're playing this festival or whatever. But at this point, there's not as much of that. So I'd say pretty much right when our intro is done, it's kind of like, all right, let's go. You know.
Okay, so tour life. That is the one thing that we have probably debunked more than anything else on this show because everyone goes in there. I mean, I'm a guy that wasn't. I've never been on a tour. I've never been associated with anything that's on a tour. If I by watching movies alone, I would have this view that tour is just one big huge party where everyone just gets drunk all the time and you just go out and have the time of your life. You are a guy who has been on quite a few tours. And from what I've learned from these people that I've had on the show previously, being on a tour isn't all that it's glammed up to be. Could you maybe explain to the audience as well what being on a tour is really like as opposed to the way it's portrayed in the media?
Oh man. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that some bands aren't crazy or there aren't a
Mm-hmm.
few like kind of crazy nights on tours or whatever, but like for the most part touring is where's a place to charge my phone? Where's a place to eat? Does the venue have showers? Uh, is the bathroom clean or do we need to find a better one? I mean, it's and it's not to say that touring is not fun. I mean, I've gotten to see a ton of places that I never would have gotten to see if I hadn't been on tour. But like, just for an example, this last tour that I did with Fetus, they played about 10 o'clock every night. So we'd roll in, set up the gear, they'd sound check. We were done maybe at 3 or 3:30.
Wow.
So then I didn't need to do anything again until like 9:30.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go, 6 hours to find food, do whatever, take naps.
Yeah.
you know, it's definitely not like the 80s movies or probably 80s tours. I think 80s tours were probably, I'm sure Motley Crue threw down.
Oh well, yeah, yeah. I mean, if a guy didn't die on their tour, I mean, that was a bad tour for them. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. That's definitely not the way most guys roll these days. Especially if you're in a van.
yeah.
If you're in a bus, you have a little more comfort, a little more space, and all that. But if you're in a van, it's just exhausting, and you're like, oh man, let's just make sure we have enough energy to play and
How do
then
you
load
guys
out.
how do you guys tend to deal with usually a lot of the downtime? Because if you really think about it, you guys are performing for like maybe 2-3 hours at the most, and then after that, I mean, the setup time takes hours or whatever too. But you guys do have a significant amount of downtime. How do you guys pass the time by usually?
It depends on the tour. Sometimes you just kind of crash out and take some naps, which is what I did last tour, as the Die Art guys will definitely confirm. um, but if you have a lot of friends on the tour, sometimes you'll just kind of go out and grab a drink, grab dinner, explore the city. Granted, you don't do that for 6 hours. I mean, that's man. I was working on the album the last tour.
Oh wow.
Kind of like getting some mixes back and going, hey, we need to do this, we need to change this part, all that kind of stuff. So that was taking up a lot of time on the last tour. But yeah, man, it's not like what people are always like, oh, you get to go on tour and it's like vacation. And I'm like, no, I work harder on tour than I do at home. So yeah, definitely not what people think.
So how does the tour, like, I know that you probably aren't behind like the scheduling and all that stuff for the tour, but being in the band, how do you guys like usually determine like where you guys are going to play? Is there a certain amount of venues that you guys would like want to do, and then you're like, we want to travel to these certain cities, or is it kind of like these cities present themselves to you and then you're like, oh, okay, we should play there? How does that really work for you guys?
It's somewhere in the middle. The booking people will handle all of that. They'll kind of decide whether it's an A market tour where you're going to play like huge cities, if it's a B market tour where you're going to play fairly decent sized cities, or C market tours where you're playing some smaller ones. And as far as like, the actual playing and the dates and stuff, it kind of depends on like where the cities are. Mm-hmm. So the Midwest, I used to live in the Midwest, and where I grew up in Minneapolis, there was not another major city going west until Seattle.
Yep.
So if you're not going up into Canada, doing like Winnipeg and what else is up there? Saskatoon and whatever, Calgary.
Edmonton.
I think that's the right way. Edmonton.
Yeah.
Yep. Edmonton has a sick venue.
Oh,
anyway, we played some festival up there with Goat Whore. It was sick. Anyway, you'll have more off days that part of the country because there's not as many places to play. Whereas like on the East Coast, chances are you're going to do like Baltimore, Philly, New York, Jersey, Cleveland, Dayton. I mean, there's tons of places on the East Coast to play. Like Texas, you're not going to have a day off probably because like Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, they're all like right there within a couple hours of each other. So geography has a lot to do with your booking as well. And routing and all that fun stuff. So luckily I don't have to do that. So
what would you say is the average length usually of the tours that you've been on? Like how many days would you say on each tour would you, on average, have you been gone?
I'd say about a month.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you'll run into 3 weeks. Sometimes you'll run into 6 weeks. Sometimes you'll run into more. But I'd say generally between, anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks is pretty normal.
So, when you guys get done, usually how long of a break do you take, like, after a tour? Because you're probably tired and you're probably drained. How long do you personally take of a break? Maybe from, like, do you ever take, like, a week off and then just, like, not do anything with musically and then just relax and recuperate? Or what is the recovery process for you, like, after a tour?
Well, the last tour, the Fetus tour, I had to come home and write 3 songs. So pretty much the day after, I got home fairly early in the day because Fetus is from Baltimore. I live out in Virginia, so it was close and it was awesome. But yeah, I took that day off, and then the next day I started finishing up the Seas of Malice album, which was fun. Usually I do take a little bit more time off, a few days up to a week maybe. So somewhere around there. But yeah, this time no time off after that.
Wow. So what is your guys for all the bands that you're in? Do you guys for like all the bands that you're in? Do you guys have the same recording process for each band, or do some of your bands record differently, or how does that work out, and how do you manage being in all that and maybe having different recording processes?
Well, luckily, there's like home recording these days, like isn't like home recording. Doesn't mean it's an amateur thing or
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many gigantic bands just hire an engineer and go, "Hey, come to our practice space and we'll do the album here."
Hmm.
You know, so basically, I can do everything at home, edit all the sessions, make sure everything is lined up and everything's in time and all that stuff, and all the tones are good. And then I just send it off to an engineer, and yeah, I mean it's actually fairly easy if you know what you're doing, which sounds kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's like, well, most things are easy if you know what you're doing, but as far as like editing and making sure that everything is in time, if you do two guitar tracks, making sure those are with each other so it doesn't sound like something's out of sync with the other one. Yeah, I mean, both bands, Skin the Lamb and actually all the bands that I do, Serpent's Whisper, Seas, Skin the Lamb, we all do everything pretty much the same way. We all do everything at home, and then we just get somebody to mix it and make it sound good. So,
Then now, I should have asked this a little bit earlier, but do all of your bands play the same genre of music, or is there multiple genres in between the bands? How does that work?
it's a good question. Serpent's Whisper is more kind of like old school death metal, more in the kind of the line of that New York style, like Suffocation, Internal Bleeding. Skin the Lamb is kind of all over the place. We sort of got labeled death metal from the EP, which I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know. And once we get the second album out, people are going to be like, huh, you decided to do that. Okay. I don't think I 180'd completely. Like, I didn't pull a Suicide Silence or anything like that. But so I don't even know what to call that one. Seas of Malice, people have been kind of saying deathcore, which I understand. There's definitely a lot of breakdowns and stuff, but yeah. So I mean, I'd say we dabble in pretty much, a lot of different subgenres of metal. I'd prefer to just call us metal.
So for each of these bands, being on drums and then someone on guitar, are there different playing styles that you have to incorporate when you're playing for like some of the different bands? Like, is there a different way that you might drum for one band as opposed to another?
Absolutely, yeah. With Seas, well, okay, with Serpents, it's basically just fast blasts, lots of double bass and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy. Skin the Lamb, the second album, I focused a lot more on playing drums, not just playing blasts or playing double bass because you can and you're supposed to or whatever, which hopefully people will get to hear. We're currently looking for a label to release album 2, which is a full length. So I definitely changed the style a little bit there. It's not that it's not metal or anything like that, but and then with Seas, it was a lot of faster stuff going into a lot of breakdowns. So I didn't want to take away from the riffs and try to do some kind of like progressive drum stuff when the music isn't really like that, So you kind of got to play to your, and it also helped that I wrote the song, so I knew kind of what direction I was going in.
So if you had it your way, would you want to play like the same style of drums for each band, or do you like it that you have different styles that you have to play because it kind of maybe adds on to your repertoire and makes you a more effective drummer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to be playing metal all the time. Mm-hmm. I listen to everything. I mean, you almost don't want to say like who you're listening to these days that aren't metal, because people will be like, oh, it's not metal.
Backstreet Boys.
Not quite that, but just as bad. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey, well, we're gonna say that. We're gonna say that for the next segment that we got on, because we do guilty pleasure songs. This is one of the questions that I ask.
Oh my God, okay. You're gonna kill me.
Actually, we've kind of walked into it right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and start our Inside the Actors Studio-esque Q&A that we do, and it's the audience is their favorite part. I keep tallies from everyone that I have on the show, and then once it reaches a certain number, I'm just gonna keep a tally. So, all right, the first question that we have here is: out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you wish that you had written, and why?
That's such a good question, man. I had such a good answer for this a couple weeks ago, and I'm trying to remember what song it was. Um, what song was it? I'm trying to think of what band it was. Well, I mean, almost. Okay, well, a good one right off the top of my head would be "Everything You Love" by Chimera.
Okay.
That's it's funny. Rob and I had talked about that, and he's like, "Yeah, that's one of my favorite Chimera songs." I'm like, that's one of my favorite Chimera songs. I just love that song. It's got good groove. It's heavy. It's got that awesome, clean intro. Um, I feel like a lot of people would probably say, some of the classics, maybe like Master of Puppets or something. I never really got into Metallica or Megadeth or anything like that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we
Sue me,
plugged
metal
Master
fans.
Puppets, but I can just say, if you've seen any of these podcasts, Master Puppets is the one song that got me into metal music. And I try not to talk about it. I talk about it on probably about half these podcasts. I try not to mention it. So you mentioned it. You brought it up. So audience, don't bitch to me that saying that you brought up Master of Puppets. Again, he started it. I'm just verifying that its existence. But yes, Master of Puppets. Okay, so now we're going to go on to question 2. But Master of Puppets plug again, Metallica, obviously. So out of all the artists, dead or alive, it doesn't matter either way. One artist that you could play with just for one concert, who would it be and why?
It's another good question. I mean, I almost kind of already fulfilled that when I jammed with Rob Arnold, which was nuts. I would also really like to play with Killswitch when Howard was in the band. But I'd also be super stoked to play in his new band, just because I'm a huge Howard Jones fan. So yeah, probably anything involving Howard Jones.
All right. So now, out of all the venues on the planet, if you could perform at any of them, what is one that you'd pick and why?
Like one that I have played at, or one that I haven't played at?
Either one.
Damn, that's a good question. Man, there's so many sick venues. The one in Edmonton is super awesome. Glass House in Pomona is super awesome.
What's the venue in Edmonton called?
That is Starlight Ballroom.
Starlight Ballroom, okay.
That's a super sick venue. Let me see. I'm trying to think of all the venues that I've been to, and they all just kind of mush together after a certain point.
Yeah.
Where are the shows always good? Texas has some good shows. Gas Monkey is super awesome. You know what? I'm gonna give it to Summit Music Hall in Denver.
Oh.
Because the shows are always good and the crew is always awesome. They're always on top of it and always are efficient and awesome. So I'm gonna say Summit in Denver.
That is the first Summit Music Hall in Denver we've had. We usually have Red Rocks has been one that we've gotten 3 times. But I'd say mine personally, I've mentioned this before, is Slane Castle in Ireland, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
Just because the scenery and everything like that would just be unbelievable. But all right, so we got a few more of these questions. Now, we already mentioned this before, and the way that you responded, I know this is going to be good, but guilty pleasure song. What is the one guilty pleasure song that if someone were to run into you and were to talk to you like I'm talking to you right now, would never guess that you enjoy and listen to?
It's not even gonna lie, it's probably full on artists that they would just be like.
I was gonna say guilty pleasure artist then too after that, so we could just add that on. We'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Cool, because I can't pick one song. It's just not gonna happen. Guilty pleasure artists at the moment. I mean, I listen to a lot of not metal stuff because I'm around it all the time. I'm not even gonna lie. 2016, I went to go see Carly Rae Jepsen at the Fillmore in Silver Spring, and it was awesome. She was great. I'm also a big Keith Urban fan.
Ooh.
Not even gonna lie, that dude rips.
Yep.
There aren't many people in that genre that are their own solo guy playing lead guitar. He doesn't have a lead guitar player because he is the lead guitar player, which I respect that. I dig that a lot. One last one. This dude is sick. Everybody should go listen to Javier Colon. That guy has one of the best voices. He actually won the first season of The Voice.
I was going to say that name does sound familiar, yeah.
God, that guy is so good. I mean, it's really ridiculous.
Have you seen him live?
I caught him in Vienna, Virginia, of all places.
Wow.
He was doing a small acoustic show before he played a sold-out show at Rams Head the next night or something like that. Man, that guy is so good.
All
his
right.
guitar playing is super underrated as well.
Oh,
He's not just like playing chords; he's playing like really complicated, finger picking
yeah.
stuff. He's awesome.
Yeah, everyone here look up Javier Colon. I haven't heard any of his music, but I'm gonna, as soon as we're done recording this, I'm gonna go look him up. So if he's really that good, I expect to be thoroughly impressed. But last question that we have for this segment is guilty pleasure genre.
Mm. Hmm. Probably pop.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to most of the, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say most, but I mean, I listen to like Carly Rae Jepsen and Katy
Mm-hmm.
Perry and stuff. And I mean, I don't really listen to like Justin Bieber or anything. Not
Favorite
that there's
Katy
anything
Katy
wrong
Perry
with that.
song.
Favorite Katy Perry song?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Man, you're asking hard questions.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
I would almost need to look through all her. Oh,
I like Extraterrestrial. That's my favorite.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like Dark Horse a lot.
Yeah, that's good too.
Man, she has a lot of good songs.
I just
Not gonna
grew
lie.
up. I just grew up when she was that whole California Girls thing. That would have been my favorite, but like it was oversaturated so much that I got to kind of like hating it because I heard it on the radio like 10 times a day.
Yeah. I remember initially not liking her because I was just like, oh my god, somebody needs to stop playing that song.
Yeah, but then I also remember like when she first took off with like I Kissed a Girl in like 2008, and like no one knew like who she was, and then I was like, oh, this is all right. But yeah, she's been really taking off. But yeah, so you like more of the pop music? That's good because we had. That's third that we've had. So out of all the guests that we've had, I started this around like podcast number 6 because I wanted to spice it up a little bit. But we've had nobody other in the artist that you want to play with. No one has ever did the same one. Out of all the venues that you want to play, we've only had Red Rock, and then Pop has been the second one. So we're getting a very diverse group of answers, which is good because I didn't want just one guy to say like the same thing all the time. So I'll have to post the results when we finally got it all going. So we see now, obviously, we've been watching you this whole time. You have a Cataclysm hat on. So do you guys have merch for your bands, and where can these people, where can everyone here, the audience, find the merch if they're interested?
So for all my bands, we're still kind of in the upswing of things. Seas of Malice actually just released our debut single featuring CJ from By Art. So we're currently working on getting the full length out, tours, merch, all that stuff will be coming. Skin the Lamb does have an EP out that's on iTunes. That's called Monolithic. We will have 2 singles for you with Seas of Malice that will be on iTunes and Spotify. We're debuting a new single, I believe, next week. I think it's a week from today. I could be wrong about that.
All right, I'm just going to write that down real quick so I can remind people if I'm recording a podcast on that day that you guys are releasing. Which band did you say is that's releasing the single?
That's going to be Seas of Malice.
Seas of Malice. Okay, so next Friday I'll have to mention that then.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I should have asked this also sooner. I got too caught up in the first couple of minutes, but all these band names, did you have anything to do with naming the bands, or if you didn't, do you still know like how you guys came up with the names for all these? I mean, we don't have to go through all of them, but just like maybe like Skin the Lamb, Serpent's Whisper, Cataclysm. Like how are those names? How did you come up with those?
Well, I don't know. I just work for Cataclysm, so they had that name long before.
Okay.
But as far as my bands that I play with, our singer Andy came up with Skin the Lamb. I think Ricky, the singer, came up with Serpent's Whisper. And then we kind of collectively just threw some stuff out in a group chat for Seas. I want to say our singer Kyle came up with that. So yeah, something about the singers coming up with band names. I don't know. Who knew?
What about Dying Fetus? How did that come up?
That's a good one. You'd have to ask them.
There's probably a story behind that. Jeez.
There most certainly is. It's crazy that some of these bands have been around since like, when I was like 1 year old, know, and it's like weird to like work for a band that I'm like, whoa, like I'm doing, drum tech or backline and stuff like that for a band that's as old as me. Like,
yeah, what is that like though? Most people don't really understand that. Like because you've played with some of the bands that you kind of like idolized as a kid and you really enjoyed. What is that like meeting these people now and being able to play with them? Like, how special does that make it for you?
It's awesome to be able to meet people that you grew up listening to. And 9 times out of 10, everybody is super awesome. I mean, the first time I was on the Chimera bus was like just weird. like looking around and seeing Mark, and I don't know, it was just bizarre.
You were just waiting
but
for like the cops to come in and bust you and be like, "You're not supposed to be here."
yeah, exactly. It's weird. No, it's awesome though. I mean, I some of my best friends are people that I grew up listening to their music.
That
So
that is
that's been super awesome.
unbelievable. Yeah, I could never like if I would ever do that. Oh my god, that would be. I just can't even get into that. But what was one thing of advice that you would give to someone who wants to start out playing drums? What would you say is like the one thing that they need to have in order to be a successful drum player?
I would say now, general rule of thumb would probably be at some point have drum lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kevin Talley helped me out a ton. I mean, I couldn't even play drums before him, and then I got lessons from him and just kind of spiraled from there.
How did you get lessons from him? Is there like a website that people can go to, or is there a way that people could contact him for lessons, or did he just do it for just you?
Well, he was living out in Maryland at the time,
Okay.
close to me, so we kind of connected that way. He mostly does studio work now, so like if your band needs drum tracks and stuff like that, he'll record that way. But even later, like after I'd been on tour and stuff like that, I got lessons. I had a lesson from Ben, who used to be the drummer in Whitechapel. That guy is like one of the best drummers I've ever seen. So I was like, I need to get a lesson from that guy. So I mean, I think just get lessons. I mean, you're never too good to learn from somebody, So
Okay, I totally forgot about this too. I'm completely off today, audience, and I apologize. But top 5 drummers of all time, go.
oh my god, oh no. Okay, all right, all right. Ben, former in no particular order, just as I think of them. Ben, formerly of Whitechapel.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Talley, of course. Ollie Beaudoin of Cataclysm is super underrated, like criminally underrated. Who else is super awesome? Oh man, Danny Carey from Tool is super awesome. Oh man, one more. I gotta think of one
Neil
more.
Peart.
He's super awesome too, but I'm gonna go
Bonham.
with John from System of a Down.
Oh, okay.
That guy rips as well. Does a lot of subtle stuff that people don't pick up on nearly enough. I'm also going to give an honorable mention to Justin from Killswitch.
Oh, nice. Okay, so one of the big topics that we also like to discuss here is most people don't know rock music has kind of been on rock music, metal music, all those genres has been on the decline really for I'd say like the last 15 years, especially since its peak in like the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And with the rise of hip-hop as well. But what do you think personally is one of the reasons that rock kind of took a downhill turn? And I think it's slowly starting to creep back up inch by inch, but it's still got a long ways to go. But what would you say is one of the biggest reason you think is the reason why rock kind of died out a little bit?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's because stuff got heavier and more extreme and it just doesn't cater to everybody. That could be part of it. I mean, I know not everybody's going to want to listen to a death metal band. It could be that. It could just be some phenomenon where other genres got way bigger. I mean, hip hop, like you said, got huge, and I mean it's still huge. But in the 80s and the 90s, just got gigantic. So it could be a combination of both. It's hard to say though.
Yeah. So one of the big themes that we talk about is perseverance and how you gotta, especially in the career of being a musician, you gotta really have a lot of perseverance in you, and you really have to be able to, shrug off all the early struggles that go through and just still keep persevering. But how much does that play in your career as a musician and like being able to take the rough times and turn it into something positive? How important is that overall as a musician, in your opinion, as well?
A ton, just because once, even if you've like quote made it, like it's not guaranteed. I mean, one minute your band could be huge, and then the next minute people are like, "Who is that? What did they do?" So I mean, you just always kind of have to keep working, keep reinventing yourself, and I mean that's kind of what we're trying to do. Like we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we also think that our sound is a little bit different than than a lot of bands that are out right now. So
now on the business side of music, what would you say is the number one key that you need to be able to have or do in order to successfully promote your band?
That's a good question too. I mean, you really need to network. Knowing the right people to help promote your band is huge, because you could have the sickest album ever, but if you don't know how to get it out to people, nobody's ever going to hear it. Nobody's going to put you on tour. I mean, I've gotten all my tours because I know this guy or I know that guy. So just networking is gigantic.
Yeah. We had a guy on here that was talking kind of about some of the guys that don't have what's best in mind for the band, like some of the like managers or some of the promoters that then end up like just stealing your money, or they end up like not delivering what they promised. What would you say is one of the best identifiers as to maybe like sort these guys out before they're able to do any damage, for some of the listeners out here that might want to know, like how are you able to successfully know of like who the good guys and who the bad guys are? Like if a guy comes up to you and wants to go to you to like be at one of his shows.
As far as managers and people that are directly involved with your band, it shouldn't be somebody that's like out of the circle. Mm-hmm. So you should know somebody that knows this guy, and you can go, hey, what's the deal with this guy? And if they're like, no, then take their advice, That's why, like, when we look for management and all that stuff, we kind of are talking to a lot of people like, hey, how's this guy with your band? He did that. Don't know if we want to be involved with that. Or, oh, wow, that was a good idea. I wouldn't have thought about that. Maybe we should hit him up, So, but that goes back to networking, just having a bigger contact list is always going to help you out. So,
and lastly, anyone out there who wants to start playing music, or anyone out there that wants to specifically start being in a band, what would you say is the number one key that you need to have when forming a band in order to make it successful and to make it fun?
I'm going to say it again. I think networking is gigantic. Just learning how things are done on a professional level is completely, like, I look at shows totally differently now. Like if I go see a friend's band play locally and I'm watching like show production and I'm going like, whoa, what are you doing? Like there's just stuff that doesn't happen on tour, or stuff that should happen. And, my first tour ever was with Suffocation and Cataclysm. So it's like, dude, I had to learn stuff right away and real quick. So I think, knowing the right people and having them give you some tips, especially as a new band, is gigantic, because then you'll seem more professional. You won't see it. You'll be more professional. You'll stand out from all the rest of the local bands because you'll have your stuff down. The more professional you can be, the better shot you've got. I mean, it's what it comes down to,
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go here, one last time, so where can everyone find your music? I mean, I know you said that you have some videos on Spotify, or on YouTube. Do you have a Spotify that they can find? Or obviously, do all these bands have Facebook pages that people could go on to contact you? And then if they have any more information that you could give, do you guys have a website? How's that all work?
We do have, we've got a Facebook, so everything is going to be facebook.com/ either Skin the Lamb, Serpent's Whisper, and Seas of Malice. Seas of Malice does also have an Instagram, instagram.com/ Seas of Malice, or at Seas of Malice, however you want to go about that. And then, all of our pages are listed on there as well. You can find us pretty much on Facebook is where we're most active. We do, pop in and out of the Instagram as well when we've got some news.
They better be some flavorful pics.
There are some good ones.
Do it for the gram.
We've got some video clips on there as well on the C's Instagram. Let's see. My page, you can find me at Facebook / drummer Parker Yowell. Let's see what else. That's pretty much it. Yeah. That's pretty much where we're at.
All right. Well, absolutely. I mean, it was really just a pleasure having you on the show. And if you need any promotions, like obviously, just make sure to message me next Friday for that promotion for that Seas of Malice song that you guys are releasing, so I can definitely announce that. But
awesome.
Thank you. Also, finally, any shows coming up that you would like to plug that are like, we get some national audiences here too, so it doesn't even matter what area they're in, but any shows coming up for you.
We're not going to be out on the road until probably next year because we're nailing down this album. So I can't think of anything right now. I would like to just thank all the companies that that have worked with me that I endorse, which would be MEE Audio, which are my in-ear guys.
All right.
Scorpion Percussion drumsticks. I've got my own signature stick, so people can hit me up and check that out. Axis Percussion. Been playing Axis pedals since I was like 15 years old. And Dean Markley strings. They sound the best. Wouldn't record without them. So,
all right, yeah,
guys...
I'll definitely make sure to write those in the viewing thing below so that people can go and check some of those things out. But yeah, if you have anything, if you guys have a music video that you guys released or anything like that you need to release, definitely talk to me. And if you want to come back on, I mean, it was more than a pleasure talking to you, and we would love to have you back on the show. And finally, just make sure if you enjoy this podcast, everyone, to make sure to like and subscribe. And Parker, man, it was great having you on.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take it easy.
All right, man. You as well. Thank you.